during the 2016 election, a government spy in the campaign. That sounds like a pretty important piece of information, that the Obama administration may have been spying on a rival campaign, you think? But for some reason, we're only just learning about it now. Why is that? Apparently because the FBI and the DOJ deliberately hid that information from Congress. Of course, Congress has authority over the FBI. It's not the other way around, as much as the FBI would like to believe that. So this deception would be gross misconduct at minimum. But of course, gross misconduct would be nothing new in the FBI of Jim Comey. Dan Bongino was a former Secret Service agent and NYPD officer, and he joins us tonight. Dan, this is one of those stories that's so shocking, if true, that A, you don't want to believe it's true, that our government would do, the Obama administration would have done something like that. But B, you have to press carefully on the details. What do we know about this?
Yeah, you're right, Tucker. For the sake of the constitutional republic, you pray this story isn't true. There's no partisan advantage. This is the very idea of having big R God-given rights has been shredded if, in fact, they can't produce hard evidence of any crime yet, and yet a human intelligence asset may have been inserted in your political rival's campaign. I mean, how this isn't front page news on every newspaper across the globe is stunning. But Tucker, that's not it, though. Keep in mind, just a couple weeks ago, Devin Nunes on this network in an interview with Maria Bartiromo had another bombshell, that there was no official foreign intelligence through official channels passed into the United States. That was a huge bombshell, because notice what he didn't say. He didn't say it didn't pass through unofficial channels. So we know two things. Potentially that information was laundered through the State Department and potentially the U.S. Senate. And yes, we know there was potentially a human asset in the Trump campaign. Unbelievable.
Is there any precedence for this? Has this ever happened before? Has it ever been alleged before in a presidential campaign?
Not in the United States. I'm sure it's happened in some spy novels and in some third world countries where this may be common. But Tucker, this is a story so unbelievable on its face that I've said to people, it's like the sickest spy novel I've ever read, except it actually happened. If you were to give this to a book agent and tell them it was a story about the United States government, they very well might laugh at you and say, this is so absurd, this could never happen. But Tucker, I have my suspicions about who this asset is, as do many others, by the way. This is going to be explosive, though, when this name comes out, because the list of suspects is very short. And there are some very suspicious people who are connected to people within our intelligence community now. But this is the key point, Tucker. Also connected to political operators working for Democrats, while connected to foreign intelligence assets as well. This is really serious stuff. This isn't a joke. And like you said before, I really wish none of this was true, but it appears sadly that it is.
Well, I mean, it would be a crime to begin with. Do you think it's true? Is there evidence that the FBI was receiving information from within the Trump campaign during the campaign?
Yes, and they're not only that. I believe there's more than one source for the FBI. Now, whether there was more than one source that was paid may be an entirely different story. I believe that based on reporting, Tucker, that's already out there. So, I know a lot of people out there love the conspiracy theory label when information makes them uncomfortable. I'm only telling you things that are already out there in the public domain. There are a number of names out there already of people who, by the way, are connected to the Obama team. One person who's being represented by Obama's former White House lawyer, Tucker, was present at a meeting Bob Mueller's investigating. A meeting right now with Russians that they're claiming has to do with Trump, but the meeting was with people who are actually connected to the Clintons. One of the guys at the meeting is literally being represented by Obama's former White House lawyer, who, by the way, worked with Andy Weissman, who's working with Bob Mueller on the special counsel when they were on the Enron prosecution. This is a big, contaminated witch's brew of people who are all connected to each other.
And in some ways not surprising, because they always accuse you of what they're doing, a la Eric Schneiderman. I mean, it's a very... Thank you, Dan. It was great to see you tonight. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. You got it.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, Trump's Big Week. While President Trump continues to make huge foreign policy gains in the Korean Peninsula and beyond, the Mueller witch hunt continues at home. Kimberly Strassel at the Wall Street Journal is out with a bombshell new piece titled, "What About That FBI Source? Did the Bureau engage in outright spying against the 2016 Trump campaign?" Joining me now to explain more from the Wall Street Journal is the author of that piece, Kim Strassel. Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Give us the quick synopsis of what you've found and why this is so pivotal and so unusual at this setting.
Well, look, up until last week, all we knew was that House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes had initiated a new line of inquiry and was demanding new documents from the Department of Justice. But then, in their desire to make Chairman Nunes look bad and justify why they were not giving those documents, someone in the government leaked a lot of details about what was happening. It turns out he's asking about a top secret government source who has worked for the FBI and the CIA, who is a U.S. citizen, would seem to have some sort of entanglement with foreign intelligence agencies, or maybe is based overseas. And based on all those breadcrumbs and some reporting, I've got a pretty good sense of who it is, and it does look as though indeed there was an FBI attempt, a successful one, to basically go out and spy with a human asset on the Trump campaign.
Now, what about the timing, right? The timing about all of this is critical. Do we understand the timing, and what are the implications for that?
Yeah, it's so important because remember, the FBI has been doggedly sticking with this story, that what initiated this counterintelligence probe was a tip that they got in July about this supposed drunken conversation of a junior campaign aide named George Papadopoulos. Well, if for any reason we find out that this person, this asset of theirs, was in fact surveilling or spying on the Trump campaign prior to that time, then they've got an issue, right? Because that's no longer their origin story. And they must have had something else that they were basing this on, whether it be the dossier or some other information that they were using as a reason to go out and surveil the Trump campaign.
Now, how are we going to figure out the solution to this? I mean, every time Trey Gowdy and Devin Nunes and others go over to the Department of Justice, they get the stiff arm, even though there's subpoenas in place. How do they actually figure this out?
You know, we have a great piece in the Journal today by a former FBI officer just talking, and his job was in fact to fulfill congressional requests, talking about how obnoxious and outrageous it is that the Department of Justice is not complying with simple requests, much less subpoenas from Congress. And the fact, by the way, that they didn't give this information over to Chairman Nunes all the way last year when he said he was investigating the FBI's conduct is really pretty striking. But look, they're going to have to, Congress as a body, and the good news is Chairman Nunes looks to have the backing of all the leadership and the other members in the Republican Party, make it clear that if the Department of Justice does not turn this over, that they will move to contempt. And with any luck, also, the White House is putting out the message that they need to cooperate and hand over documents.
But I thought the White House was actually backing up the Department of Justice at this point, weren't they?
Well, it's interesting. The Department of Justice made quite a big deal in its letter back to Chairman Nunes about how it had this had all been done in consultation with the White House. But curiously, it did agree to sit down with Chairman Nunes, and I think probably they have the order to accommodate him in some way. They're still trying to do it without getting out of having to hand over actual documents. But as that is what Chairman Nunes and others are actually after, it would seem that's what they're going to need to hand over to fulfill that request.
Yeah, you know what? I as one who's actually been over to the Department of Justice and sat in those meetings and listened to these blowhards tell me how Congress has no right to see this stuff. And I got to tell you, it really is offensive. And at what point does the Constitution actually come into play? I mean, they give lip service to oversight. But here they are leaking. I mean, it's pretty well documented that they're leaking. But what is it that they think they can't and shouldn't show to Congress, which is essentially the American people?
Look, you know this better than anyone. We have processes in place whereby Congress gets to oversee the executive branch. They can't just say, give us everything. They have to have specific cause, reason, things that they're looking for. And as this piece we ran today made clear, when those cases came up, the Department of Justice has always helped and been good about it. And we also have processes whereby, in particular, the Gang of Eight, right? The senior members of our intelligence committees, the leadership, can see anything in a classified situation. So any arguments that this should be off limits are completely bogus, and people should read them for what they are, which is an attempt by the Department of Justice and the FBI, it would seem, to protect something that they simply don't want people to know because it might prove embarrassing.
Yeah, and that's really at the heart of it. It proves embarrassing.